There are these hidden rules that govern power in our relationships, an invisible architecture that, whether we realize it or not, determines who leads and who follows. Today, we're going to decode those rules. The prize is always the one who is comfortable walking away. Now, that's not just some clever phrase. It's a fundamental law of human dynamics. It's a paradox, right? It feels both intuitively true and, honestly, a little unsettling, because it suggests that in the delicate dance of power, the person with the most control is the one who needs it the least. This single idea, it's the key to unlocking one of the most powerful and often most painful dynamics in human interaction: the chase. Okay, so let's really break this down. The entire dynamic operates on this fundamental principle you see here: leverage versus vulnerability. See, when one person shows they don't need a specific outcome, they gain power. Their indifference, that's their leverage. But on the flip side, showing high effort, the constant checking in, the need for a quick response, that signals vulnerability. It basically broadcasts that your emotional state is dependent on them. And once that's out in the open, the power balance shifts. Big time. In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct these hidden mechanics, piece by painful piece. But before we get into the cold, hard mechanics of this system, we have to understand what it actually feels like to be on the losing end. Because this isn't just some abstract mind game. It's an exhausting, all-consuming emotional state. It's a kind of quiet torture that so many people experience but really struggle to put into words. A personal battle waged entirely inside your own head. Have you ever been there? That feeling of being on a hamster wheel, constantly trying to close a gap that someone else is just effortlessly maintaining? You text, you call, you plan. You're the one putting in 90% of the effort, and they respond just enough to keep you hooked, just enough to keep you investing. This imbalance of effort, it's not an accident. It's designed to create a state of chronic anxiety. It's a psychological trap that leads to this huge strategic miscalculation, where you believe that more effort is the solution, when in reality, it's the very thing cementing you in a powerless position. And this feeling, this hamster wheel of anxiety, it actually has a name: Relational Deficit Anxiety. It's that intense, gnawing feeling that gets triggered by ambiguity, by the unknown. When someone gives you just enough attention to create a connection, but not enough to provide any security, they're introducing scarcity. And our brains are just hardwired to react powerfully to scarcity. This anxiety doesn't just feel bad, it's a strategic tool that's being used to shape your behavior. It's the engine that locks you into a high-cost pursuit, forcing you to overinvest your time, energy, and emotion just to find a tiny moment of relief. And you can see how these states just feed into each other, creating this vicious cycle. The crippling anxiety we just talked about, that leads directly to decision paralysis. You're so afraid of making the wrong move, of texting too soon, or not texting at all, that you end up just making reactive, fearful choices, or no choice at all. And this constant calculation puts your brain under an immense cognitive load. You're spending all your mental energy trying to decipher their signals, which leaves no room for clear, strategic thought. This, in turn, creates status dependency, while your own self-worth gets tied to their validation. And the final result? A profound sense of helplessness, the feeling that you have absolutely no control over your own emotional state. All right, so we've defined the feeling. Now it's time to pull back the curtain and analyze the system itself. We're moving from the emotional experience to a cold, hard look at the mechanics. How is this dynamic actually built and maintained? What are the levers of control here? The entire structure, the whole thing, is built on this one unshakable law: the principle of least interest. A sociologist named Willard Waller figured this out decades ago. In any relationship, the person who is less invested, less committed, and less afraid of it all ending, well, they hold the most power. They get to set the terms simply because they are more willing to walk away. This isn't necessarily about being mean or cruel, it's just a structural reality. The person who needs the interaction less dictates its terms. And that principle of least interest, it almost always creates what's known as dependency asymmetry. It's a fancy term, but what it really means is a simple imbalance. One person's well-being, their happiness, their sense of calm, becomes way more dependent on the relationship than the others. This isn't an accident. It is the absolute foundation of the chase. The pursued person doesn't even have to do anything malicious. They simply have to be the less dependent one. And that imbalance gives them all the leverage they need to maintain control, often without lifting a finger. And this right here is the critical moment. This is the leverage point. The other person pulls back, gets distant, signals indifference, and what's the anxious, reflexive response? It's to lean in, to try harder, to close the gap, to send another text, to ask what's wrong, to increase your investment to make up for their withdrawal, and in that exact moment, the trap slams shut. You have just confirmed their power and basically taught them that their inaction is an incredibly effective tool to command more of your effort and attention. So this escalation creates this self-perpetuating engine, what we call a feedback loop. Let's walk through it. First, the signal. The pursued person signals low commitment. Maybe they cancel plans or take forever to reply. Second, the escalation. You, the pursuer, feel that spike of anxiety and you react by increasing your investment. You double text or suggest a new plan, desperately trying to get some certainty back. Now, the crucial third step, the reinforcement. After a while, the pursued offers a tiny, unpredictable reward, a short reply, a vague promise, just enough to keep you in the game. And finally, the lock-in. That little breadcrumb of attention renews your hope, and boom, you are locked right back into the chase. This loop can go on forever, draining you a little more each time. And what's the ultimate result of this feedback loop? Well, it's a structure of control we call emotional gatekeeping. This is pretty much the end game of the chase. It's a state where your emotional peace, your ability to feel calm, happy, or secure, is no longer in your own hands. It becomes dependent on their actions. They become the gatekeeper of your good feelings, holding the key to your emotional stability. They can grant or deny access whenever they choose, which keeps you right where they want you, dependent on them. So why is this dynamic so incredibly powerful and so hard to escape? Why do smart, capable people get caught in this loop all the time? Well, the answer isn't a failure of character. It's a failure to understand that this system is hijacking deep-seated psychological triggers in your brain. It's working on a level far below conscious thought. The whole thing works so brilliantly because it hijacks your brain by exploiting three powerful cognitive biases. First, you've got loss aversion. Psychologically, the pain of losing something feels twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining it. So the threat of them pulling away triggers this intense fear, forcing you to make irrational investments. Second, intermittent reinforcement. This is literally the slot machine principle. An unpredictable reward is way more addictive than a consistent one. That random text message is a jackpot that just keeps you pulling the lever. And finally, reward prediction error. Your brain is always looking for resolution. The gap between the connection you hope for and the minimal one you actually get creates a tension that fuels the chase. Put them all together, and you have a nearly perfect psychological trap. And this is the absolute key right here. They aren't really exploiting your desire for them. They are exploiting your deep human need for certainty. That need becomes a currency. They can buy your attention, your time, and your effort by withholding certainty and then selling it back to you in these tiny, unsatisfying bits. They control the flow of validation, and in doing so, they control you. And this slide really nails the final piece of the trap. The constant anxiety and emotional volatility. It puts you in this high arousal state. Basically, your fight or flight system kicks in. And when you're in that state, your brain physically cannot access its higher-level strategic functions. It temporarily shuts down your ability to step back, look at the situation objectively, and make a different choice. Without that ability, you're just locked in a purely reactive loop, unable to access the very thinking you need to escape. Okay, so that was the diagnosis. We've dissected the system, we understand the psychology, now we pivot to the solution. This is not about blame or defeat. This is about strategy. It's about a clear, actionable protocol to neutralize the dynamic and reclaim your power. So, this is the central question, isn't it? If trying harder doesn't work and just passively waiting doesn't work, what does? How do you stop being a piece in their game and fundamentally change the rules of engagement? The countermeasure is a three-step procedure, the Investment Decoupling Protocol. First, you have to learn to recognize the signal. See the lopsided effort not as a problem to be solved with more of your effort, but as data, a clear signal that the dynamic is in play. Second, and this is the hardest part, you must adopt strategic stillness. This is not passive waiting, it is a proactive, conscious refusal to chase. You stop reacting. You deny them the payoff of your frantic effort. And third, you must re-anchor validation. Your sense of self-worth has become dangerously tied to them. You have to consciously and deliberately get that validation from other places, your work, your hobbies, your friends, places that are totally outside their control. And just look at this comparison for a second. It shows the profound shift you're making. You're moving from a reactive state of high effort and high anxiety to a proactive state of calm observation. You go from being completely dependent on the outcome to being independent of it. Your validation shifts from an external source you can't control to an internal one that you can. This isn't about not caring. It's about shifting the very foundation of your power. It's about engaging from a position of strength and stability, not from a position of need and anxiety. And this really brings us to our conclusion. As you start to master this, you begin to realize that the entire idea of power you were operating under before, well, it was flawed. It's not about controlling others. It's about something far more valuable. Here it is. This is the core strategic insight of this whole explainer. The emotional ups and downs, the constant anxiety, the desperate chase, that volatility is a massive vulnerability. True lasting power is stability. It's the ability to stay calm, centered, and strategic, no matter what's going on around you. When you cultivate your own internal stability, you basically become immune to the manufactured scarcity of others. Your well-being is no longer a currency they can trade. It belongs to you. And so we're going to leave you with this final thought. The strategic countermeasure isn't some clever move to finally win the chase and get the prize. That's still playing their game. The real victory, the ultimate power move, is to realize the game itself is rigged against you. The only way to win is to stop playing. It's to reclaim your focus, your energy, and your attention, and invest them back into the one person you can truly control, yourself.